Spend $18 billion on a train and there's no train, does that raise suspicions for you?
Yes.
So you think that might be something worth looking at?
For sure.
We also had a $650 million 911 service that they scrapped after 6 years, so absolutely no value from it. Maybe that's another example where there might at least be questions.
I think you got a lot in California.
Picture two states, different politics, different cultures, different budgets. Now picture the same problem showing up in both places, quietly, predictably, and at scale. What this hearing exposes isn't a local scandal, it's a pattern. Money moves fast, oversight moves slow. And when alarms go off, the system often looks away. Before we talk about Minnesota or California, this matters because it answers a bigger question ordinary taxpayers keep asking. How can so much money disappear without anyone being clearly responsible? That question is what turns this from a policy debate into a trust problem. Mr. Dexter explains that investigators were redirected away from active fraud cases, saying investigators were pulled off their work to input past complaints into a new database, effectively shutting down ongoing investigations. That line lands hard because it's familiar. Most Americans know what this looks like in real life. You don't cancel the investigation outright. You bury it under process. No confrontation, no memo saying stop. Just new requirements, new systems, new priorities, until nothing happens.
Before. So you mentioned in your testimony that you think that what you discovered in Minnesota, that this is not isolated to that state, but likely exists in other parts of the country as well, correct?
Correct.
What makes you think that?
Well, now you're seeing, since I've posted that video, lots of other people have started to go to other locations, for instance, in Ohio, or in Maine, or in California. They're also seeing the similar fraud take place in other daycares, for instance, in a lot of other locations.
Yeah, I have a particular interest in California, being from that state, and we know that there's been a lot of fraud. There was $32.6 billion that's been confirmed in unemployment insurance fraud. There's 1.2 million fraudulent community college applications. Have you gotten any sense, or have you seen any signs there that sort of are similar to what aroused your suspicions in Minnesota?
Yeah, and fraud in California might be worse than the fraud in Minnesota.
What makes you say that?
Well, $24 billion went missing for homelessness. They've been trying to build this train for years, yet there's hardly anything to prove for that. Fires.
Yeah, those are good points. So you look at let's run through a couple of those. Because I mentioned the areas where we have confirmed fraud, but then you also have these areas where you have so much spending, and then we look at what results from that spending, and there's nothing. So $24 billion in homelessness, and yet the homeless population went up, and a state audit found that they couldn't even figure out where the money went or what the outcomes linked to that spending were. Is that something that is kind of a red flag for you?
Yeah, it's a major red flag, and you don't even have to be smart to be able to know that that's a red flag.
Well, unfortunately, our state legislators haven't managed to figure that out, or at least the governor hasn't. So what are you saying about him?
They're not smart. No, but yeah, I mean, it's so obvious, and that's what we saw in Minnesota, is how complicit the government has been in enabling this fraud to happen. Quality Learning Center had over 90 violations, yet they continue to give that daycare $1.9 million.
Yeah, that's a great point. That there's the political accountability just hasn't been there, and that's what enables it to continue. So then you mentioned the high-speed rail as well. So there has been about $18 billion spent so far. No track has been laid, and not a single passenger has ridden the train. So when you spend $18 billion on a train and there's no train, does that raise suspicions for you?
Yes.
So you think that might be something worth looking at?
For sure.
We also had a $650 million 911 service that they scrapped after 6 years, so absolutely no value from it. Maybe that's another example where there might at least be questions.
I think you got a lot in California.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing what you find. We're certainly trying to use whatever tools we have here to bring more accountability in California as well. Mr. Dexter, I wanted to also ask you a couple of questions about your work, because you have extensive experience on the law enforcement side trying to detect fraud. That's actually how in California we discovered the EDD fraud, the unemployment fraud, is it wasn't the state suddenly figuring it out. It was district attorneys who came together and investigated and in fact pointed to the fact that the state had let this happen and failed to heed their warnings and hadn't taken basic fraud detection steps. So is this something that you encounter? Like, what kind of internal controls make it so fraud is more difficult, and what type of lack of internal controls make it so fraud is easier?
I would say the biggest thing was the fact that when we tried to investigate this, once we started bringing cases forward, and it showed that the number of centers that we investigated were Somali, the biggest roadblock was the fact that they didn't want to follow through on these cases. They shut down investigations. They made us, in light of the report from this outside management firm, we spent nearly a year pulled away from our investigations because one of the things they determined was that when our unit started, we didn't have a proper case management system for recording and keeping track of the tips. So as investigators, we instead had to spend nearly a year entering past complaints made to DHS into a newly created database. We couldn't do our investigations because of that. So they kept us from doing our work, basically.
Yeah. So the states that make fraud detection a priority have less fraud than those that actively contravene efforts like yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman's time is expired.
This isn't about Minnesota or California. It's about what happens when oversight becomes optional and responsibility is diffuse. Fraud doesn't need bad actors everywhere. It just needs enough silence, enough delay, and enough process to outlast attention. And once that becomes normal, the real loss isn't just money. It's confidence that anyone is minding the store.